Scorpio 22, a hunter starting out for ducks. Hunting is quite an interesting activity. Not only do we need this desire to have something that we want passionately enough to do work and to invest time and energy and to put ourselves in harm's way very often, because sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. But we also need sensitivity. We need to tune in to the prey. Which way is the wind blowing? Can you smell anything? Can you see anything? You know, it's very sensitive activity, hunting, as well as this passion. So we've got these two qualities to try and balance, and they tend to be opposite qualities. One tends to be fiery and not very sensitive at all, and the other one's like really kind of very sensitive, lacking any expression at all. It is tuning in. And these two extremes of our behaviour are being studied here. We're not actually talking about hunting as such, not going out with a gun and shooting things, but what we are talking about for the general person, most of us don't shoot things anymore. But what we do is we have desires. We want what we want. That's a very strong factor in our life, isn't it? We want what we want. It may not be as strong now as it once was, but when we were children, it was the strongest thing that we had going. And it doesn't die, it just dies off in people that can't maintain their vitality. So we want what we want, and yet we can't just pick up the fruits of our desire from a tree. It just doesn't drop into our mouth like that. We have to go out and look for it, and usually there's somebody else that wants what we want instead of us, and there are difficulties for us to get what we want. And it might be a job interview. You want a job, and there's 20 other people who want the same job. It might be a love affair. A lot of people want the same woman or the same man that you want, and so on. Often there is a need for us to understand that we're not going to get given what we desire, not without some enterprise. We have to take the initiative. We have to strike out and make a claim on the world if our desire nature is to be fulfilled. And we're studying that question here. How are we with that? There are various stages of this. We have to understand what it is we want, and that may be put into a different time frame. For example, we may want something now, but we know full well that after we've had it, we will be sorry that we've had it, like lots of drink or another affair or whatever. We understand that our desire is for pleasure only, not as a stepping stone towards joy. So those things we have to use a certain amount of discretion about. Sometimes we give in to that temptation, sometimes we resist it. If we don't give in to it occasionally, then we just become grey and lifeless. If we give in to it all the time, we tend to get unhealthy. And so the first thing to do is to recognize what the desire that we're feeling is. Is it a desire for joy or a desire for pleasure? Another factor is that we have to consider ourselves worthy. A lot of people have been persuaded that what they want is just too good for them, that they're not worth it. Well, if you have a desire, then you might as well think you're worth it. See what happens if you pretend that you're worth it until you are worth it. But that's one thing we have to deal with, whether or not we're worthy, and then whether or not it's attainable. Our desire might be so unrealistic that we cannot imagine attaining it. But other people might have the same, or the desire for the same thing, and not concern themselves with the practicalities. They just dream, and some miracle might happen. That's not unheard of. Usually, though, what works well is if we turn our wishes into something more than that. Wishing is wishy-washy. It doesn't get us very much. But wanting something, desiring something, and having a clear intention to get something, this is what works usually. Now, the hunter is starting out for ducks. The hunter is no doubt equipped. Boots, strong waterproof clothing, a bag with equipment, bait and so on for fishermen, and maybe traps for other types of hunters, and maybe a gun and bullets, or whatever the hunter believes he will need. And we need to set out to achieve our life purposes with that attitude. We need to become prepared. We need to learn things. We need to receive information. We need to take advice, guidance. We need to challenge opinions. We need to really apply ourselves to understanding what we desire and where it is. If we're looking for something that's just not there, we're not going to find it. So we have to consider the habitat, metaphorically speaking, of our heart's desire. So, for example, if you want peace and stability in your life, then there are certain cities in the world, certain places in the world where that's simply not available. And if you're living in such a place, you're not going to achieve your desires. If, however, you want to be busy and hungry for interaction with people, and pats on the head when you do well in a job, and lots of money, and all the trappings of proving that you've coped well with society's modernity, then you're not going to get that in the country. You need to go to a big city for that. These are very, very simple ideas, and it's surprising that people really don't get them right. The bottom line, though, is that if you want something, it's your business to go and get it. It's not going to fall into your mouth off the tree. It's not going to just knock on your door and present itself to you. You've got to set about getting it, and that requires enterprise. Now, enterprise necessarily means that we're going to lose before we win. We have to invest if we're to expect any possibility of a result. That's what it means. We have to invest money, we have to invest effort, we have to invest time and other things too, in order for us to have any chance of getting what we want. And by far the largest majority of the people I talk to as clients are unhappy with their lives because they're unwilling to invest in furthering it. Like, for example, if somebody's really stuck and bored because they're living in a certain city with a job that they don't like and people that they don't get on with, and they can't see anything in this particular place that's of any interest to them at all, then it's intuitively obvious to me that the best thing they can do is travel or even move away. Just get out. And yet the reluctance to do that, the lack of enterprise, means that they're stuck in place. And they stay stuck in place, and they get more and more stuck, because the more and more time you have invested in a place, the more and more difficult it is to leave it. And like I say, this is the largest majority of the clients that I speak to. They get stuck in place. We can't do that. We have to set out for our ducks. We have to leave home if we're to go hunting. Hunting is not an activity that you fulfill at home. Now, the one other thing that can be said is that hunting is full on. It's passionate. And life is like that, really. You cannot approach life in a half-hearted way, that's not the inaction of desire. That is not the formula for fulfilling your desire. We must not be inhibited if we're to get what we want. And what inhibition is the fear of disclosing the truth of who you are. Authenticity is so very important on the spiritual path. It's a necessary condition, and it's almost a sufficient condition for spiritual realization. Authenticity. We have to be who we are. And if we have desire for this or that or the other, those desires are authentically who we are. Now, some of them might be inappropriate. Some of them might have to be tamed, as our animal nature so often needs to be. But we need to be honest about the fact that we feel that, or we simply have no chance of realizing who we are in the world.